In the previous lesson, we developed an insight. In this lesson, we're going to create an idea. So just to recap, we know what we're making, we know who we're selling it to, and we have our insight so we understand how those people think. Our idea is something that connects all of those disparate parts and brings them together. Let's get started. So now we formulate an idea. What is an idea? It's a clarifier, it's a connector. It really takes all of the different things that we've already established in this process and it brings them together. We have what we're selling, the audience, the insight, and now we really need to come up with a statement that takes information from all of those and unites it and gels it together. So your idea should give the audience a new way to understand the product. An idea, often when it is really good, it explains the why of your product. It's almost like this is the reason that we invented it to sort of prove this point or to play out this idea. And if you can nail that, then you really generally have like a very good idea. You often won't get to talk to the people who actually made the shoe or the record or the car or whatever. It's almost like you're trying to reverse engineer why this thing was made to sell it to the people you're trying to sell the thing to. Your car may have been made for whatever many reasons, and they want to sell that car to new moms who like to drive fast. You have to now find that idea that connects all the things you learned about new moms who like to drive fast, your insight, and the car, and put it all together to make it seem like from day one, this car was built for new moms who drive fast. I like to think of when you recommend music or movies to your friends, you usually position the thing in a way that gives it a reason for being. You don't just say, hey, there's a new detective show on, you should check it out, it's really cool. Your friend probably won't watch that detective show that you've just recommended. You kind of have to give, let's call it a take on that thing. You have to really give it a reason for being. And so if I say, hey, there's a new show on TV, it's a detective show, but the detective is a serial killer, you're now a little bit more interested, right? If I say, hey, there's this raunchy rap record, but it's from a woman's point of view, there's an interesting reason for being. If I say, hey, there's a show, it's Sex and the City, but for Black women, you immediately begin to wonder, how is Sex and the City different if it's Black women? What changes? If I say, hey, there's a show, it's Twin Peaks, but for rappers. Okay, what does that look like? That's a very specific worldview. Or I say, hey, there's a show, it's like Friends, but all of them are degenerate, awful human beings. Again, this is a very specific world, and you're sort of like, hey, what is that thing gonna look like? This is what you want to do as you come up with your idea and you present your idea. You want it to have that sort of interest in it, that sort of tag that pulls you in. And with all the things I just sort of riffed on, those are all real things. A detective show, but the detective is a serial killer. That's roughly the TV show Dexter. A raunchy rap record, but from a woman's point of view. That's Megan Thee Stallion, who's one of the most popular rappers out right now. Sex and the City, but for Black women, that's the HBO show Insecure. Twin Peaks for rappers, that's the FX show Atlanta. Friends, but they're all degenerates, that's It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So if you're familiar with any of those things, you can see now how just from that one line, I didn't give you much details, but from those one lines and the actual execution of the show, you can see how this is a very specific take on the world that sort of draws you in and gives you something to really hang on to. Let's pause here and take a look at this commercial from Land Rover called Sword Collector. It's a little bit older, but it's very funny, and you can really see how the idea here drives this commercial, and afterwards we'll get into it and dissect it and pull it apart.
Hey, can we talk?
Is this about my swords?
No, I love these things. Just come with me, though.
I lied. It is about the swords, actually. HR says they all have to go.
Not the daggers.
The daggers, all that crazy people stuff has to go.
So we just watched a commercial for Land Rover called Sword Collector. It's very funny, obviously, but I think it's a really great example of how you can get to an idea that you watch that commercial and it seems totally left field, seems totally out of the box, but when we dissect it, it totally makes sense how they got there. So let's look at this brief. The brief is very simple. We want people to understand that Land Rovers are safe. That's it. So how do we get people to think that Land Rovers are safe, to associate Land Rovers with safety? You could list all of the, JD Power and Associate things and crash test dummies and that, the other, but people aren't going to really retain that information. It'll just get lost in the noise. So you got to do something more interesting, something that can hit them a little bit more sharply, something they'll remember. Comedy is a great way to get people to remember stuff. So we look at the Land Rover audience. Land Rovers are pretty expensive. Most people who own Land Rovers probably work in offices. This is a little bit of an assumption, but let's roll with it. So people who work in offices own Land Rovers. Easy enough. So people who work in offices, what are situations where they might feel unsafe? There's plenty of options where people might feel unsafe in an office, or not even totally unsafe, but maybe unsettled or uncomfortable. They went with two specific things that happen for people who work in offices. One is when you have to have an awkward conversation about some degree of etiquette or some sort of social thing. When you work in an office and someone maybe brings in weird food and heats it up in the microwave and it stinks up the office, and you got to have a conversation with them about that. Or maybe you stole my stapler, or you stole my chair, or this, that, the other. These situations can be uncomfortable. Great, we've got one thing, but we need something else. What else do we have? Oh, most people who work in offices, especially if you work in a big office, there's some weird guy who works at your office. Now, this guy doesn't have to be the weirdest person. This person doesn't have to be like crazy, but they have some weird tick or something about them that makes them a little bit off. That's fine. But that guy can sometimes make you feel a little uncomfortable. Think of Dwight from The Office. Dwight's a bit weird. Actually, think of most of the people on The Office. They're all a bit weird. If they worked in your office, you'd be like, Michael Scott is a little bit off. He's a little bit weird. Great. So now we've got having uncomfortable conversations in an office makes you feel unsafe, uncomfortable. The weird guy in your office makes you feel unsafe, uncomfortable. So you take those two situations and you put them together. You have to have an uncomfortable conversation with the weird guy from your office. Now it is very uncomfortable. Could we use a Land Rover to make you feel more safe? That's pretty much the idea. They obviously have exaggerated it, so the weird guy in your office, you're not having a conversation with him because he keeps bringing fish into the office and putting it in the microwave and heating it up and it stinks up the office. No, you're having a conversation with the weird guy in your office who brings swords to work. Lots and lots of swords. And you want to feel more comfortable when you have that conversation, so you take him to the garage, you get in your Land Rover where you feel comfortable, where you feel safe, where you feel like nothing can hurt you, and you feel empowered, and then you have that conversation with Sword Guy about why he should not bring swords to the office. Again, when you just look at the end product, it seems like, how would you ever come up with this idea? But when you break it down into the audience, you break it down to an idea, it all comes together and you really understand how you end up with a guy sitting in a Land Rover talking to a sword collector about why he can't bring swords to his office. So let's get into our examples and check out how we can use insights and our audience to create a very interesting idea. So now we're going to dive into our examples. And for each one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump off each insight that we established in the last lesson and show you how that insight can turn into an idea in and of itself. Let's get started with the wrapper. So the first insight we had was that with time comes wisdom. We understand better how the world works as we age. Jumping off of that, the sort of approach that we could have for this record would be that the oldest criminal is likely the smartest criminal. This positions our elder statesman rapper as not only just an older criminal in his stories, but also the smartest. He is the apex criminal because he's been around the game for so long, absorbed so much knowledge. And our second insight, we had that people listen to gangster rap for vicarious thrills. The characters the rappers portray do all the things the audience wants to, but shouldn't. And so we get this idea coming out of that our rapper isn't just a criminal, he's a superhero. Your superhero. This is his theme music. Again, we're going off that insight and building it into something that feels a beautiful execution. We're taking in the information we've gleaned about the audience and we're turning it into something much more powerful. And then on this one, we have the insight to be an older criminal, our rapper's character would have had to seen a lot, done a lot, learned a lot. He'd have to have a lot of stories to tell. So here the idea is really simple. An old criminal is a nostalgic at heart. We really play on the idea that if you were an older criminal, you would love to hold court and just tell everyone about the things you've done, the capers you've pulled, all the different lives you've lived. That can make for a very interesting way to approach working up this album cover. We also have the insight that our rapper has sampled old soul records with his new record. Old soul records are often love songs, they feel sweet and musically rich. So here we can come up with the idea that this album is our rapper's love letter to criminality. We're taking the love aspect of the music that he's sampled, and then we're taking his lyrical content of being a criminal. We're taking his age, and this is an older criminal, and he's really just sitting here pontificating about why he loves to be a bad person. And isn't it just so sweet and so lovely, this way of living life? This is the best thing for him. This is the thing that he loves above all else. Beautiful. Now we get into example 2, the running shoe. If we go off our first insight, life is like an endurance race. It's about perseverance, pacing, and focus. We could come to the conclusion, we could come to the idea that we're all runners already. Because we've all done all of these things, these aspects of running. We've persevered, we've paced ourselves, we focused. This is an idea that can really be easily exploited. It's inspiring to the novice runner to see that even on just a billboard, the idea that you are part of this club without even ever stepping foot onto a track or running a mile, you're part of this club and we want you to keep doing what you're doing. That's very empowering to someone who's undertaking a new activity, especially an activity that's going to be very hard and draining, and you're going to have to put in a lot before you start to see the rewards. Insight 2. New runners are always running towards something, goal-oriented, improvement-oriented. So now we get into this idea that a brighter future is only a step away. And we're really taking the information we have about the audience that, hey, these are people who are trying to improve themselves. They're trying to better themselves and put in work. And again, we come out with an idea that is very hopeful and very inspiring to them, that every step that they're taking is getting them closer to their goal, getting them closer to a better version of themselves, to a brighter future. Again, a very simple idea that can lead to a lot of different executions, but it comes out of our audience insight and understanding who our audience is, what they want, and how they see the world. Then we also have runners often find it hard to make time in life to run. Then we would go off that and really posit the idea that new runners fight time in 2 ways. Obviously, they fight time. When you run, you want to have the quickest time. And so every second that elapses, you're like, I want to beat that. I want to get faster, faster, faster. But they also fight time in the way of, we all fight time, of trying to find a moment to do the things we want to do, to find enough hours in the day. And there's something very interesting about this sort of contrast of fighting time to be fast. When you're running, especially for speed, you want time to be slower almost. You want to try to cover more distance in a short amount of time. When you're in your normal life, you oftentimes want time to go quicker. You're at work and you want to get home and get to the things you want to do. You want that time to go quicker. When you're waiting at the bank or you're waiting at the airport, you want time to go quicker. So there's something very interesting about that push-pull of wanting time to go faster and wanting time to go slower. And this fight that if you're a runner, you're constantly fighting time and trying to manipulate time. That again can lead us to some very interesting executions it could lead to some very beautiful stuff. So we have another insight. We could hone in on the shoe's comfort. They're so comfortable, you stop thinking about your feet. You stop thinking, period. Running is a form of meditation. So here our idea could be very simply, your day is chaotic, these shoes are your peace. We're pushing off that idea of running as meditation, and we're framing our shoes as a device that takes you to your place of sanctuary, of calm, of peacefulness, of just thinking about yourself and focus. At times, not even thinking about anything at all. A lot of times when you do research about runners, they talk about getting into a zone where they're not even thinking about moving their legs. They're just flowing, they're just moving forward. They have totally become clear-minded and are just pushing forward. This is very appealing to people, especially people who live chaotic lives. And to be honest, all of us live chaotic lives, whether you are a high-powered attorney, a mom of two, or anyone in between doing whatever, there's always going to be some degree of chaos in your life. Let's exploit that and really push our shoe as the antithesis of that. It is pure peace. It is meditation. Again, this leads to all sorts of executions that you could think about. You think about peace, you think of meditation, you think of calmness. There's all sorts of ways we could exploit that to create something that is beautiful and unexpected for a running shoe. So if we do all of this correctly, if we go off of our insight and we build this idea, process will often feel like you're reverse engineering the product. Again, it will feel like this statement was the thing that the engineers had up on a whiteboard. You could imagine if you're making a running shoe that your day is chaotic, these shoes are your piece, could be up on a whiteboard as this, engineers were working with material. How do we make this more peaceful? How do we make it feel more comfortable? Again, it should feel like you've reverse engineered the product. Our ideas should be very simple. If you can't express it in one line or maybe two, you've done something wrong. You're trying to say too much. Keep it as simple as possible. And now that we have an idea, we can move into executions. And as we went through all of these ideas, you can see how the phrasing of them has sort of led us to places where you immediately should start getting visual executions in your head. We're looking at this one, your day is chaotic, these shoes are your peace. We immediately can start thinking of imagery around meditation, imagery around calm, waterfalls, anything that feels like it's meditative and serene. We can start thinking of that. And now we can start combining that with imagery of running, and we're on to something new and interesting. So for the purposes of this class, I will use the following ideas for each project. The wrapper, we're gonna go with this album is our rapper's love letter to criminality. And for the running shoe, we're gonna go with we're all runners already. So we're gonna keep going on those two and continue to develop the work and get into executions later.